My guest today is the author of the best-selling book Long Story Short and is written for Dreamworks TV, the Hallmark Channel, and Pixl Network. She's performed on Best Week Ever and Late Night with Conan O'Brien. She's also the founder of the storytelling program at UCB and a Moth GrandSLAM champion. I'm excited to welcome Margot Leitman.
Thanks for having me, Adam.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I've been meaning to have you on for quite a while. I took your class like almost 2 years ago and really
And
enjoyed
things
it.
got
Yeah,
canceled. And then we were
everything
supposed
got
to do another one and it got canceled. And I think I was going to try and do your podcast when I swung back in to do the canceled one. And then our lives changed.
100%. Yeah. Are you back to teaching in person quite yet, or are you still
No.
doing everything online?
I want to be in person, but I mean, I have things scheduled even in Seattle, like through, I live in LA and I work in Seattle a lot, and through like December, still online. So I don't know. I'm very excited to work in person, but I haven't done it yet.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, it's different pockets of the country are like opening up fully. I mean, LA's going backwards, right? Like you guys are reinstating.
LA's gotten scary again.
Wow.
I mean, we had just like a week and a half ago a scare with a vaccinated adult we know tested positive, and we had a lot of direct exposure with her the day before she tested positive. But then none of us got it, but she was a vaccinated person, so it's a little bit alarming.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm vaccinated. My children aren't because they're not old enough, but like, it was very alarming.
Man.
So that's what the state of things in LA and
Yeah,
things like
yeah,
that kind of
that's
happening.
didn't mean to start on such a
No, it's just
Yeah, that's
mm.
crazy.
So we're going a little backwards, but I'm for it right now because that was just a little scary.
Yeah. Well, luckily, like, I mean, Zoom and all these alternative teaching, like using the web and stuff, has made it possible for you to teach still, right? Like it.
Yeah, it has, and I work all the time, which is great, and I'm lucky in that way. But there's things that, because I teach people storytelling and I work with like all types of people, there's a lot that's not the same. I mean, I I've done work with like people that were literally like enemies in a war coming together, each sharing their story, and at the end of each of them learning how to share their story properly, like these people that were literally enemies in a war zone were hugging each other and crying. It was the most unbelievable experience, and I'm like, that could never have happened on Zoom.
No.
I mean, just
It would have been a little
so
different.
things are a little different on Zoom. So yeah, there's things like that I really long for. But then there's also stuff like I take attendance in a class on the first day and everyone's like, I'm from New Zealand, I'm from Portugal. And I'm like, well, that would have never happened. So there's
For
that.
sure. Yeah, it's got some pros and cons. Like doing this, even like when I started podcasting, it wasn't like we didn't have web stuff. I didn't even know about Zoom, and we've had a bunch of people
No,
on that
who did?
we wouldn't. So it's definitely
Yeah.
like there's nothing the same as like being in the room with a person and like kind of
Yeah.
that magic that happens. But I don't know. I'm stoked to have you on still, and
Yeah.
let's talk
But I'm
about
sorry we
like
can't do it in person. We had been trying for a while. And was formerly in Seattle about 4 times a year, which is a lot. And
yeah.
things change.
And that for people that are interested, like it's a storytelling fundamentals class.
Yeah, I do. I am doing some of those online this fall. I'll put them up on my site. Yeah, that anyone can take them from anywhere. Yeah, but hopefully I will be coming to town soon in person. That's what I'm working on it.
Nice. Well, keep
Yeah.
me updated on that. Like, let's go into your background a little bit. Like, what, where are you from originally? And did you come from like a storytelling family, or was that your own path?
I'm from New Jersey. I don't know if I come from a storytelling family. My mom's a teacher. My dad was worked loosely, like he had a degree in sociology, and then he worked on a bunch of things that studied people for a while, and then eventually studies and like predictions and statistics and stuff. So I wouldn't say either of those are too story based. My brother's very creative though, so it comes from somewhere. Yeah, but I wouldn't say that we were a family that told great stories all the time. I wouldn't say that. No.
Did like what did you want to do originally? Like how did you kind of get into this field?
You mean like back, way back?
Yeah.
Well, when I was 3, I wanted to be a circus performer.
Hmm.
Uh, and in hindsight, I think I could have. I just had a doctor's visit. He said I have the flexibility of someone in my 20s. So I do think I could have been some sort of an acrobat had I really focused. So I'm sorry. I feel let down
Are
about that.
you like a big yoga person or like
I am, but
okay.
I am a big yoga person, but I also was a dancer in college and things like that. I'm just super, and I'm also they used to call it double jointed, but now they say hypermobile is more PC. But I have like legs that bend backwards, things like
Gotcha.
that. So I think I would have been a great acrobat, but no, I didn't work out. I didn't go for it though, so who knows? And I still haven't gone for it. So maybe if I did,
There's
it would
still the
happen.
option.
I've still got the option, and I imagine post pandemic, the first thing people are going to be doing is circus, big crowds at the circus. But then I wanted to be some sort of performer growing up. I think I always had like a knack for that, and then I, for a long time, was going in a career path towards fashion design. I owned a business in high school. I co-owned a little shop, and then I got a bunch of scholarships for fashion design because I was like this young entrepreneur. And then I was really burnt out by the time I was supposed to go to college with that because I had already run a business and I was like 18.
Damn.
And I decided the last minute to go to school for theater instead. And then I went to school for theater. And then that eventually, when I was realized in college, I guess that I was funny somehow, in what I was being cast in and what I was doing and stuff. And then from there, I did improv, sketch, and stand up, and then eventually storytelling. So it's a long path.
Like why so I remember you saying that you did stand up. Like what was the time like where was it? Like New
New
York
York.
City?
Oh, New York, New York, New York. The whole time. From right after graduation. Well, okay, I'll say this. I graduated college and I took a trip cross country. And from upstate New York, where I was living, to LA. And I went to a show at the Comedy Store, and then I was talking to some of the comics after, and we were all laughing together. And one of them was like, "You're so funny. You should do stand up." And I was like, "I don't know." And then he put me on his open mic the following week.
Which
And
was it someone that like people might
who was
know?
it?
Yeah.
It's no one I'm in touch with. It was Bobby Lee,
Oh
but
wow.
we're not. Yeah, but we're not in touch now. I mean, he probably doesn't even know. But anyway, so he was like, "You should do it." So I went on the open mic, and I did 3 minutes. And I think had that gone poorly, because I really had no interest in doing stand up, I think my life would have gone in a very different direction. But it went well. And then so that was how it all began. And then I went back to New York after that trip and then lived there for like 10, 11 years. And then I did stand up for about 6 or so of those, like
What
pretty solidly.
what was the timeline for that? Like I'm just trying to picture
Like,
like
what do you mean timeline?
what years like
Oh, early 2000s. Yeah.
okay. Where like were you mainly in Manhattan or were you doing it
Yeah.
in Brooklyn or cuz I know a lot of like indie stuff has moved to Brooklyn. But
Now,
yeah.
but at the time, it was still a lot of East Village shows. And
Okay.
that's where I did stuff. I did tons of stuff in the East Village. And then all of these people came. It was like people like Nick Kroll, like, started to emerge from that era of people, or Chelsea Peretti, or people from that age. Like, so we're all around the same age, and they all, that's the generation of people that I was doing stand up with at the time.
Yeah, and why did you inevitably leave? We talked a little bit about this beforehand, but
I love to talk about why I left. Well, I hated it. That's the short of it. I didn't realize I hated it, but I started panicking before shows. I started like completely panicking before I had a show, and trying to figure out any way I could to get out of it. And people were killing for stage time, and I would have it, and I would be figuring out what would be a reasonable way or something that could happen to me that would make me not have to do this show. And then I would do a show, or before the show, I remember moments of like laying on the floor and just panicking before, which is just a sign that things aren't going well. But I have this thing in my mind of, how do I explain it? Like I have to finish what I start. And so I felt like because I had given this 6 or so years and things were going in the right direction, that how could I possibly walk away from this? And by going in the right direction, I mean, at the time, like in the early aughts in New York City, there were certain like marks that you could hit that to be getting them. And I was getting all of them, I was getting TV appearances, and I was at the time it was that, remember those like talking head shows that were like, like it would be a person and it'd be like, the thing about Christmas is, or whatever it was. And I was getting on those, I was on the short list for those shows. And I was, doing all of these recurring bits on Conan and all of this stuff, which was like all of the things that I was getting auditions for network TV shows, all of these things. So it was like, how could I possibly walk away from this thing that is leading me towards something else that I'm clearly making headway on? And that's why I had so much trouble walking away from it, because at the end of the day, I just didn't like it. And that was really challenging.
So how did that transition into storytelling?
Well, I had this idea that I was reading these books of like memoirs, and people were telling these like brutally honest stories. Specifically, I read some stuff by Spalding Gray and the writer Jonathan Ames, who's moved more into television and film writing at this point. And I was reading these books and I was like, wow, these are really personal stories. How are they, how is it possible that a person could like share something like this? And then I remember seeing, at the time there weren't a lot of storytelling shows, and I saw one and I was like, oh, I have to do that. I have to go and do that. And then I remember I had just gotten signed by a manager for stand-up, and I felt like I had deceived him. And I sat down at lunch and I was like, I don't want to do stand-up, just so you know. And he's like, well, you're going to have to. And I was like, I really don't. I think I want to tell stories, and I think I want to be like a female David Sedaris. And so in the big picture, that's what I'd like to accomplish. And he was like, that doesn't exist. I don't know what you're talking about. That's not a job. So can you continue? Like I kind of did a bait and switch. I like got signed and I was like, by the way.
Yeah.
So, and it was this weird thing. And then I just was like, well, then fuck it. I'm going to tell stories on my stand-up shows. And that's what I started doing. So I just started doing all my shows, but not doing my set. I just like my sets. I just threw it away.
How did that go?
Also, if it hadn't gone well, I would have stopped, just like that first time I did stand-up. But it did go well.
Okay.
I was always pretty sure about like, if I always just asked the MC, I said, can you just say she's going to be telling a story? And then we'll be okay. And that kind of prepared the audience to not be too jarred, and then it would be fine.
Were they typically like funny stories though, or like?
Yes.
Okay.
Always the funniest.
Okay. Because I was just confused for a second. Like if you went and did a very serious story, like at a stand-up show. But
no,
that would be kind of the ultimate middle finger to your manager, though. Just be like,
yeah, I'm going to start getting really real here. No, I started doing like all of these really funny stories that I had that I'd always wanted to tell, and working on them and crafting them. I started taking all these writing classes where I was like writing them all down, and I learned how to construct a story properly from just the art of learning how to write better. And that was the transition. So it was, and I mean, I also like at the time went to therapy to break up with like end a relationship with stand-up. Like that's literally what I talked about at therapy. That was why I started going.
Were you like working a day job too during all of this?
I worked often from sometimes 7 a.m. till midnight. So I had a great job that I bartended at the UCB Theater in New York and Chelsea.
Oh, wow.
And it was great. And a lot of wonderful, I mean, like friends for life and amazing experiences. And there's a book in there somewhere, because it was during like the best heyday of it. It was like right when 30 Rock came out and all of the stars were like getting picked out of there, and it was the most fun job ever. But then I also was on stage constantly. I would also like often be like selling drinks and then rushing on stage immediately and having someone cover the bar while I was doing it. I mean, that happened constantly. But then I also had a job, and then I substitute taught in the day. So sometimes I'd be working till midnight and then substitute teaching in the day. And yeah, that's what
That's just, I guess the reason why I ask is it's such a, as somebody that's kind of in it right now, I don't think most average people understand like the toll that kind of takes on you. Like it's just you're always buzzing, like you're always there's always something that you need to do, especially in a place like New York that's like it
You're never
never
home in New York. No one's ever home in New York.
no, and it I don't know, it's a big like energy suck. So I can understand like when you went from at least for me like when everything shut down during the pandemic, like there was sort of like it felt like almost like coming off of drugs where
Yeah.
like I'm out every night, I'm doing sets every night, I'm around people every night. There's just so much like so many endorphins happening there to then go to like, oh, I'm just staying in all the time. And like it's this community that's very strange and stuff to like kind of get out of that. It's a big change.
It is. I mean, and I just think at the time it would be, I would substitute teach. Sometimes I would work in there. If they needed me, I would stay late to run aftercare for extra money. Then I'd go bartend. And that would be a lot of days. And on the days that I wasn't doing that, I was performing at night after working. And so on days when, so like even when I was working, I was watching and consuming my craft all the time. So
Yeah.
it's so funny because when things slightly opened here, a friend of mine was doing a stand-up show and another friend asked, do you want to go see so-and-so's show? And I was like, I think I consumed enough comedy in my life. Like I didn't realize that when I didn't for a year that I was like, I think I still need a little space from consuming it. Because there was a period of my life where, and then I started teaching storytelling soon after that, right? And so then I would be hearing stories in class, then bartending and hearing performances there, then performing and hearing like it was just so much.
Yeah.
But I mean, they say 10,000 hours. Believe me, I think I've had 20.
Yeah. It's,
In the
I
world
mean,
of comedy,
there's
yeah.
sort of that like fatigue aspect of it too, that it's so
Yeah.
intense and then like you get kind of desensitized to it too. Like it's it's very strange, but like when you did get into storytelling, like what was that like sort of scene like? Was the Moth happening yet
Of
or
course, yeah. But
okay.
that was so separate from the comedy world at the time. Now it's not. But it was so separate.
Can
There
you
was,
explain like what the Moth is just to
yeah.
people listening? Because I don't know how many people are familiar.
So it's a nonprofit storytelling organization. It's international now. And you can go to themoth.org and they hold storytelling events called the Moth Story Slam that anyone can put their name in and they pick 10 people and then there'll be a winner at the end of the night. They have curated events with special people. They have a really amazing podcast. It's a really great thing to get involved with if you want to tell stories. And it's very democratic in the sense that the 10 names that are called at the Story Slam are the 10 people that tell stories. So it's really anybody that really wants to break in. Eventually you will. You may have to go a few times to get your name called, but there's no priority to slipping a friend in or anything like that we see sometimes in stand-up, which is great. So that was so separate from stand-up at the time. Like, and I remember it felt like there was like a literary world that I thought that maybe I could be accepted into if I dressed a little bit more normal or if I had glasses or something like that. I remember being like, maybe if I started wearing glasses. And then there was the comedy world, which socially was like completely perfect for me in so many ways. And I was like, I think I want to go to that. So, I mean, obviously, as I'm saying this, it's very clear that I just needed to start telling funny stories in that world, and I could combine both. And once I figured that out, then my career went in the direction that it is now, and has continued to move in the right direction in a way that I feel like is fulfilling, and I can support myself doing what I love. But at the time, it was like, I'm funny, but I want to tell stories. So I guess I just can't. Like that's where I guess I'll just talk to my therapist about that again. Like I just couldn't figure out how to cross it over.
Why did, because I think we talked about this a little bit in your class, but like stand up
Yeah.
has this built-in expectation of like you need to keep the audience laughing. Like there's this
Yeah. Yeah.
concept of laughs per minute where like a good stand up that performs at a club like touring is getting 4 to 6 laughs per minute
Right.
per set and or throughout the set, which is people like if you really break that down, I mean that is a very hard thing to consistently produce over 45 minutes. Like
Yeah.
it requires really tight writing and like, you know, just and to meet that expectation, a lot of comics kind of go to like cheap ways of getting laughs and things like that. So like to go this route of storytelling, the payoff and timing is so different. Like
Yeah.
it's there can be like somebody like Tom Segura who does a lot of stories in his comedy. Like there can be long periods of time without a laugh, which is
Now, yeah, isn't that freeing that it's evolved to that?
yeah,
I think it's so wonderful when I see specials like that, and it is they have the pacing is so different now. It's wonderful. I think that's awesome. I think that with storytelling, you can often get maybe like you might get 6 laughs in your whole set, you know, or you might get no laughs, or you might get as many laughs as you would in stand up, and it just depends on the story, and all of that is okay. So I think when I first started doing it, I went for funny, 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 funny because I only knew that, and I felt like my success was based on that. And then as I got more comfortable as a storyteller, I was able to tell the more serious stuff.
yeah. And
Yeah.
do you remember like what the first story that you told on stage?
I do, and I'm not going to repeat it here. It was really graphic, and I think that's why it killed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like a
So it did
really,
well though.
it went really well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a I mean, I have to imagine you were talking about having like anxiety before these shows to like it's I've heard like breaking down artists in different ways and like some artists like they almost their creativity reinvents the form a little bit or the approach and like you're going a different route than anybody else is going and that's got to be a very scary thing. Like
I've always felt that way, that I have lost a lot of time by being afraid to go a different route than the way everyone is going. I think that I've lost so much time doing that. And that's always when people are like, what's the advice you would give? I would be like be in touch with what you really want. You know, it's like you come from a family of farmers and you don't want to be a farmer. You're probably going to spend a lot of years farming, even though that's not what you want, just because that's what everyone around you is doing, you know? I mean, I think that that is a very common thing that we all go through. I mean, I was a theater major. I thought I needed to become an actor after I graduated because I was a theater major. Um, and then I remember moving to LA and I had sold this TV movie and this made for TV movie. And I remember my friend said to me, didn't you ask them if you could be in it? You wrote it, you know? And I was like, oh no. And she's like, you didn't think of that? You probably could have gotten a small, I was like, it didn't even cross my mind. Like I was just happy to be writing it, you know? And so it's very, you know, I didn't have that. And then I have friends that like every single day of their life are dedicated to making it as an actor. And that's very admirable, you know? And that, so it's like, I spent years of my life working in that, pursuing that because that's what I went to college for. And that's what people around me were doing. I spent years, probably a few extra years in stand-up because that's what everyone was doing. And it could have been a much easier transition if I had just listened to myself.
yeah, but nobody ever talks about that, you know? I mean, there's always like in these communities there's a lot of like social pressure like what your friends are doing or what other people or someone who's experiencing success like oh I need to do what that person's doing and then there's sort of this industry type shit where that's where people are making money making a living so it's hard to like be true to yourself because it's a lot of times you're the only one that believes in that you know.
It's so hard, you know, like going back to Ron Howard, right? like, working on sitcoms and, since he's been 3 years old, and he's like, I just would rather be behind the camera, and like eventually listen to that gut and like, look at him, I mean, yet everyone that's ever done it is usually a big success story. Everyone that's like listened to their gut. So I guess it's like, I think I had this mindset that like I needed to be failing at something in order to be walking away from it rather than just not being happy.
Yeah.
And because I wasn't like completely failing at stand-up, I wasn't rising the way some of my colleagues were. Like at the time when I started doing stand-up and I was so involved with UCB in New York, there weren't at the time a lot of stand-ups hanging out. And so it was like I was around, and some other people, and Aziz Ansari was one of those people, and he was rising so quickly, right? And so, I mean, what was happening for me was not like as definitive as the career trajectory that was happening for him, but I was still having like things that made me feel like I was on the right path.
Mm-hmm.
And I think had I been like a complete failure, I would have walked away so much faster.
Yeah, and wouldn't have had all this guilt about it. Like,
no, I would have had no guilt. So, but I think that's a good lesson to be like, you don't have to be failing horribly at something for it to not feel right to you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another good point. We got all kinds of gems coming out of this episode. But I did want to touch on like the competition side of stuff. So you go from, telling your first stories, kind of getting into the Moth a little bit, but then you started competing. Like well, you're
competing every time you do a Moth story slam.
Okay.
Yeah. It's because it's an open mic, but then they score you like the Olympics, like with cards after.
All right. And were you doing like open mic storytelling in addition to that, or were you just doing like these GrandSLAMs?
No, I had a show, a storytelling show that I co-hosted with my friend. Yeah.
Okay. And was it like weekly or like what? How did monthly? All right.
We had that every month for many years. And then then storytelling at the time, a lot of more shows started opening up.
Gotcha. And were you having fun with it? And it wasn't like that same stress that stand-up was?
Not at all.
Nice.
It was not like that at all. And the relationships were different with the people, because in stand-up,
you could be honest.
There's a facade often that we have backstage of bravado, myself included. And that kind of, I get it. I get why that backstage bravado is there. But in storytelling, you're about to go up, and some of these people are like going up and telling a story of like story where they got divorced or something really vulnerable. And they're not in that headspace of bravado. They're in like a really honest, genuine place. And so the relationships I started building with people that also were doing storytelling were very quick and very intense and very lifelong friendships. And I still have friends from when I did stand-up as well, but it was a different feel backstage that felt more comfortable for me personally.
It's a weird...
You know what I mean? Oh, sorry.
I've only been to your class, and one of the guys in your class told a story that was like, there was just this moment where it was like everybody in the room felt like they were feeling the same thing. Yeah. Like, and it was the first experience I had with this, where like, you're not laughing, you're not like, it's just this really true, and I'm in recovery, so I go to like meetings and stuff, and like that, I've had a similar thing where it's like, just like all the air goes out of the room and like everybody's focused, and it's very, very cool, and it just feels super real. Comedy is a very different thing, and like, I think there's this like weird exchange going on with the audience in comedy that it's hard to like articulate exactly, but it requires that bravado, but at the same time, too much of it can be detrimental, and like the personality types that it attracts are very interesting, we'll say, and like it's a complicated thing. So like I appreciate both, but like there are times where, being around comics and stuff, it's just like I don't know if in New York that was better than other places, but that feeling of like competitiveness and stuff, it's
Oh
just
no, it wasn't better.
gross.
No, it's not better in New York.
I've
It
heard
was
parts in New York can be good, like community wise now, but I don't know if that's new.
Yeah, but I can't speak to that. I haven't lived in New York in like 10 years, first of all. And I can speak to the time I was there, which is very different than it is now. And I think a lot of things have changed for the better. Like what you were saying about that comedy special that you watched, the pacing of, I think that has changed. I think people are more genuine. And I think especially after this year, the conversations amongst people have gotten better. I think there's a lot of like really positive change, really, really positive. Uh, but I mean, the amount of, it was like, I feel like it was like you'd walk backstage and you had to fight for who had the funniest bit or who could be the funniest, loudest person in the room. And if you didn't win, then you weren't allowed to talk. And what? Why are you laughing?
No, it's just very true. Like there's this
Yeah.
weird,
At the time, yeah.
and at some point, like you get the acceptance of those people, but then it just, I don't, the crazy thing is a lot of them from a career standpoint, they haven't done anything yet. You know, like it's like you're having that experience, but you're in the back of a laundromat or something that like, it's just not, I mean, it
On
doesn't,
a Tuesday at 11 p.m., right? Yeah.
it's crazy, right? Like I mean, you talk to, and also like very successful people in life. I mean, you can define success differently, but like there are a lot of people that have had a lot of really good career success that aren't like that at all. So it's very like kind of a mind upside down type of shit, but I don't know.
I have to say, at the time though, when I was like transitioning out of stand-up and doing storytelling, was the time that I worked a lot on Late Night with Conan O'Brien as a sketch performer. And I was on that set a lot. I played a bunch of characters and I played one recurring character. And the people that worked there that were stand-ups or former stand-ups that now were staff writers on the show or worked there, it was very nice to see that lack of bravado and that genuine conversation and coming in and talking in a green room together and I had like some of the most intense conversations in that green room with various people. And then they'd be like, all right, goodbye. And like, it would be so different. And so I do remember that being like, not everyone's like that, you know, it's so that, and most of the people that work there were from the stand-up world, you know? So
Yeah.
It was a good experience to see that.
Yeah. I've heard different things about Conan too. Like I just listened to Robert Smigel talking about, because I think he was the initial head writer for Conan, and then he ended up leaving to do like Triumphed, the whatever, the insult dog, the like rubber dog at the end.
Yeah, I know what that is. Yeah.
But there are a lot of like really interesting people that worked at Conan, and it's crazy I remember being like 12, 13 years old watching it at night. So I never was like, I don't know about you. I didn't watch a lot of late night TV.
My parents did.
Yeah.
My mother loved David Letterman.
Yeah.
And love.
Carson too. Like,
when did that go off the air? I don't recall that being on in my childhood, but you were probably younger than me and you remember it being on, Carson?
No. I always hear my dad talking about like Carson. Yeah.
I don't remember ever seeing that, but I mean, Letterman was on when I was a kid, and my mom, I mean, religiously, she had a VHS tape of her favorite bit that he ever did that she would like show when friends came over. It was this thing of like him and a scientist, and like every science experiment went wrong, and he was so funny during it, and she would be like, Claire, come here. I got to show you this. Have I shown you this yet? And like she'd put it in the VHS and show this bit. And it was funny every time. But yeah, like my mom was so into late night, but I've never really been a person that watches it too much either.
Yeah, my mom was the same way too, actually. It's weird too, because people like, I think everybody enjoys funny stuff, but like that it like, you probably had your version of whatever that VHS tape that you showed to people that was like, in line with your taste or whatever, but it can be so like it's weird how comedy tastes are so different, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm like, yeah, I just 2 weeks ago made my husband watch a 20-minute David Sedaris story of him just standing alone telling it, not even with an audience. 20 minutes made him sit and watch it. And he was just like, it was good, Mark. I was like, but that part where he, but yeah, I just did it. It was just on a laptop, not on a VHS.
It's
Totally did it.
crazy.
Right. Yeah.
So, back to we digressed a little bit, but
That's okay.
how many like competitions did you end up competing in? Are you like technically like retired from competitive story?
It's been a year. How many did I do? 5. I think I won like 5 of the Moth Story Slams. And then I won one of the GrandSLAMs, which is when all of the winners compete completely against each other, and then there's one winner. I think that's the numbers.
Do you like competitive storytelling though? Because I just did a comedy competition, and I hate it. It's not like
Why?
Go ahead.
Why do you hate it?
There's so many factors that influence the outcome, like timing when you're going up on a show, geographics, like where you're doing that show, like the type of people that are watching, and just the sort of it being subjective in nature, like different. My story is going to be appealing to certain groups of people more than other people, or my stand up. And I also just don't like it being like they're being binary, like this person's funnier than this person, because it's not. I mean, there's the fundamentals and like the actual like craft of it, but I might not be for you and you might not be for me.
I get that. I mean, I like watching more than anything. I don't like watching sports, but I love watching the Olympics. Like I love a score at the end of a gymnastics set. I love to see a swimming race and then there's a winner immediately and then that's the end, rather than like watching 4 hours of a football game. I kind of like being a spectator for things like that, for sure. And as you're saying all of that, I'm like, yeah, it is all subjective. It is completely like, I remember one time I met these people online before we went into the Moth. Then I did my story. And then these people online, because also the people at the Moth, you just pick people out of the audience to be the judge, right? Like, does this table want to be the judge? Does this table? So it's just completely random, which sometimes is really fun. But I remember these people were standing next to me in line and they had gotten to know me a little bit. And then when I performed later, they're like, we didn't give you as much of a high score because we know you. I'm like, first of all, you don't know me. We talked for 10 minutes. But second of all, like, give me the score you wanted to give me. Yeah. And so that was frustrating. And I imagine things like that happen all the time. But there's another show here called Story Smash, and it's a storytelling game show. And I love it. Like it is such a good show. I'm giving it a major plug. You have to go see it. Christine Blackburn hosts it. And I really think she has a wheel with topics and you have to tell a story on it. And there's a panel of judges. And like, one of the worst performances I've ever had was my first time on that show. I was like, oh my God, this is so hard. Oh my God, and the pressure. And I could not have had a worse performance. And I was like so embarrassed by it. And then a couple months later, I was like, I want to try to do this. And it really, instead, it motivated me, the competitiveness of it. And then I went back and I won. And then when you win, you have to come back and compete again. And then I lost. But I won once. And I think for me, it made me want to get better. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword for sure. Okay. So for anybody who is interested in like getting into storytelling, I wanted to just do kind of like a high level, this is something you teach. You have a book that I read, Long Story Short, and there's a addendum too, right? There's
a workbook. What's your story?
What's your story? I got that too. And really, I still have like my notes from it. I go back to it, but like in your opinion, what kind of common things make up like what would be considered a good story, and what mistakes do you see people making the most?
I think a good story is concise. Try to tell the story shorter if you can. You know, try not to go on forever and ever. I think a good story is honest. Don't inflate the events. Don't you can I mean you can say we talked for 45 minutes and maybe it was 32. I mean, I don't care in that way, but I mean, don't say you punched someone in the face when really you walked away. That's what I mean by don't inflate the story. Be vulnerable, but not too self-indulgent, meaning that tell it from the heart. But also, if you're not over it yet, it may just be self-indulgent to tell it because you may be just kind of spewing things that aren't a story yet that you can't make sense of. And there's places for that, but maybe it's not the stage just yet. But I think vulnerability, when done right, is really great. Um, I think I've been thinking a lot about lately is self-awareness. Like I have a lot of trouble when people tell stories and they're completely unself-aware of their shortcomings or how they're coming off or etc. Like uh I've read a lot of stuff that I feel like is really unself-aware. But when it just feels like I I don't know that I don't know how to explain this, but like you have to be able to make fun of yourself. And if you're telling a story that's like super like, you know, I'm in the Alps and I can't find my lover, and you're not like being self-aware of how ridiculous that sounds, then it can be problematic, is what I mean. And I do hear a lot of stories of being in the Alps looking for your lover, and I'm like, you've got to be like, I know, but I was, and I couldn't find him anywhere, and I was starting to panic. Then I'd be okay, you know. But it's like when people are that way, it's sometimes I get a little bit off the rails. And then also don't be too preachy about what you've learned. Just let the story stand for itself and speak to itself. You know, I'm a big fan of always being educating yourself. I'm personally taking a suspense fiction writing class right now. You know, I'm always trying to learn other skills, and they're talking about that too in the class, saying that like trust the intelligence of your audience, don't spell things out. It's the same thing I say in storytelling. It's like, don't play for the dumbest person in the room that needs it heavy-handedly hammered in what you've learned. Play it to the highest intelligent person in the room. Like, let it speak for itself and let them think about it and let it marinate. Like, don't dumb it down.
Yeah, as you were saying that, it reminded me of like all the bullets I had made from your book. But one question I have is like, so you were saying the thing about the Alps and the self-awareness, and
Yeah.
do you think like I'm somebody that's lived in I think 12 states now, or 11 states, and like when
Which is
you
why
look
you
at,
have such a nondescript accent.
yeah, like I lived in Minnesota, but my family's from Vermont, so it's this muddled.
So I have never heard someone, I couldn't, I mean, do you get asked where you're from all the time?
Yeah,
It's not an accent I've ever heard,
it's
but
just
I like
it's a mix, yeah.
it.
But I wonder like things like playing to the smartest person in the room and being self-aware and stuff, like a lot of that works well on the coast, like New York
Yeah,
or LA.
I agree.
When you get in the middle of the country, like there are these, it's almost like everything inverts where like everybody's on the farm, and and it I sometimes as a creative person, like I question like, do I need, like, do you have to find the middle ground between those two things? And because most people that are professional creators or whatever are on the coast, like Chicago's kind of an exception to that, but
Yeah, it is. Well,
it's
I think it's very different for stand-up than for storytelling. There are storytelling there, believe me, because I work and coach people all over the country.
mhm.
There's storytelling everywhere. And anyone that's going to go to that show is a person. I mean, I always joke that like a person in the audience of a storytelling show is often an NPR listening, New Yorker reading person.
Yeah,
And I'm not saying that that people that go to stand-up shows aren't, but it's a certain type of person that's going to go to a stand-up show, and they may be that college professor in this town that feels like they don't fit in, that finally found a community in there, who knows? But I trust that if you're there and you want to hear stories, that you're going to relate to the bigger themes no matter where you are. So if I'm going to, like, I told us, I worked at a convention for like clergymen, and which is not really my target demographic, but I just told like certain stories at it, and I didn't dumb down anything. I just chose material that I thought would work. And so I'm not saying dumb down for people that you don't think are going to be as smart as the people here. That's not at all what I'm saying. I'm saying trust that everyone's going to rise up no matter where you are.
Yeah.
And I really feel that. And like, so I just was choosy with my material, and I didn't really change anything. And I told stories that I tell all the time. I just chose the more G-rated ones, and it worked very well. And I was myself, and I dressed as myself, and I was myself, and I was humorous, and I didn't pretend to be anything else, and it worked out just fine.
Yeah. So it goes back to that authenticity piece. And but one thing too you're highlighting is like, it's the craft of this a little bit, where you got to have the Rolodex of the variety of stories in there to where you can be like, oh, so this is where I'm at. I got, 6 G-rated stories. I can do ba ba ba, and like, and that's what most people don't see in this stuff. Like, if you got 2 stories to tell, and you got to do the clergy of it, and one's raunchy and one's, completely different.
A little less raunchy.
yeah. It's just, that's where like your experience kicks in. But
of course I wasn't asked to go speak for 700 people when I first started doing this. I wasn't, that's not something that happened in the beginning. And in the beginning, I did make a ton of mistakes and tell the wrong story for the wrong crowd. I got very spoiled by hosting a monthly show where I started having regular people that would come to the show every month, and they kind of knew me and my personality, and they knew my little quirks and stuff. And then I would go and tell these stories in other places, and sometimes people would be like, "You're an asshole," and I'd be like, "Oh, well, you don't know. In the past 10 shows, I talked about all this other stuff, and now I'm just,
It's it's that type of stuff is hard. You have those habits, and like, you don't even think about it until you're in the new place, and you're like, "Oh no, guys, this is me." But like, you guys know, they don't.
They don't know you at all. So yeah, I mean, that just comes with a lot of experience. I mean, so much comes with a lot of experience. But I think with storytelling, it was like I could go on with it if it didn't go well. I could. And with stand-up, when it wasn't going well, if a show wouldn't go well, I would have a lot more trouble moving on from that for some reason.
It's pretty brutal.
It does feel brutal when it doesn't go well. And it doesn't go well often.
Yeah.
Stand-up. Like, you have to get used to bombing all the time, and you do get used to it at some point, but it's a weird thing to it's not a normal thing to get used to that.
No,
It doesn't feel good.
I think you sort of have to be a little twisted to really like want to be a comedian, because it's like baseball or something, where you like three out of 10 times being successful at the plate is like being amazing. Like, you're gonna fail more than you succeed. So like, if you don't like the process of failing and growing from that, like, it's not going to be a good experience. And most people don't want to fail all the time. Like, it's a pretty reasonable thing not to want to do. So
my actor friends, I think, really relate to what you're saying as well. I think that's a similar feeling that someone once said to me, if you're an actor, you have to be used to the fact that most of your life you will be unemployed, which is wild.
Yeah.
And like some of the most successful actors, they're like, well, I didn't work for 2 years. That's a long time.
That's crazy.
In between this show and this show, I didn't work for 2 years. And if you really think about that, that probably felt like 20 years, But so I think what you just described is relatable for not just stand-up, but other professions as well. Yeah.
My friend's an actor. He came on here, and he was saying how, like, when he gets auditions to stuff, he goes, but like getting the audition is the win for him.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
anything
It's a
that
good
could
mindset.
happen, cool, but like
Mhm.
it's just getting it and doing the audition is a win. Any other expectation is detrimental to him. And I was like, damn, that's a really healthy way to look at it. Like I need to think about that when I bomb and like have
Getting
a
booked on the show is the win. Is that the comparison?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
But
That's how you'd have to do it. Getting booked on the show is the win. That's a great way to look at it.
for sure. So just wrapping up some of this stuff before we get into your story for today. Any advice to new storytellers or anyone that wants to get into it?
Yeah. Start start telling your stories. Prepare them beforehand. I always say don't improvise, don't memorize. So you don't want to get on stage and just like completely just go off the top of your head, because you might get sidetracked, but you also don't want to over prepare and present it like it's a corporate presentation. So that would be, find a middle ground where you feel prepared, but it's not too stiff.
Okay. Sorry, I was looking away. I'm trying to cue up our music for the transition here, but
Oh, this is okay, but I need to prepare everyone. As I say, don't do too much. Is that I have not been on stage since, I don't know, March of 2020, beginning of March of 2020. So I was going to tell the story more conversationally with you. So it's not a big, please don't is there like a curtain function that's going to happen and a lighting change?
no, it's
Okay.
we just have a nice little transition music for the break.
Oh, okay.
And then
Okay.
no
Is there a
big
filter
change.
that's gonna come on
No,
me or
you're
something?
good. And this is good for people to see like just sort of the actual like how the sausage is made type stuff.
Okay, this is not as polished as I just said it. Everyone else's story should be, though. I'm letting you know.
Totally fine. I mean, you can't get to that polish without going through it. So
Yeah.
It's story time. It's story time with Phantom. Yeah, it's story time. It's story time with Phantom and friends.
I love that music.
it's good, isn't it?
I'm such a fan, legit diehard fan of Bobby Brown's music from the early 90s.
Yeah.
And that reminds me of that era of music so much, like the Boyz II Men era, that I just want to listen to that song more in my life.
I'll have to tell the guys that made it that the guy that like edits the podcast, he helped produce it. So
New Jack, it sounds like New Jack Swing. Is that what it's called? New Jack Swing, New Jack Sound. That's what it sounds like. It's so good. It's like one of my favorite eras of music.
Yeah. I dated somebody that was like all about that type of music too. And it would come on in the car and just she would lose it.
Don't get me started because I am so this is a whole separate story. But like my obsession with it as a small child went in a really crazy direction, specifically with Bobby Brown, like complete obsession to a point that like it was like I discovered like sex by watching his videos. I was like, wait a minute. I don't like want to date him. I want to do other things. And wait, hold on. I have to show you something. Hold on. This is a recent gift. Framed 45 of Bobby Brown track, Roni, my favorite of all of his songs, the dirtiest. Yeah, love it.
Who gave it to you?
Someone who knows me very well, my friend Brandy.
That's awesome.
But also read his autobiography. It's good. You want to read some juice? You want the tea spilled? Oh my God, read that book. Okay, this is not what we're supposed to do.
This is a great transition into the story, though.
I have a whole story about Bobby Brown that I didn't think about. All right, so this is what I was going to tell you about. So I'm not a ghosty type of person. Like there's a lot of people out there that I think are looking for a ghost in their life. Like they are a person that's always trying to find a ghost, or they're always having these moments they think are a ghost.
Yeah.
And And I don't see myself as one of those people. In fact, at times I can be annoyed by people like that. I live in this house now, and we had a handyman come, and my husband called me as I was coming home. He's like, look, we're paying this guy by the hour. Somehow in conversation, he just brought up that he is a ghost hunter, professionally also. So can you just not go get into it with this man, because we're paying him by the hour, and we'll just let him. So of course I walk in and I was like, hello. And even though I don't see myself as a person that wants to see ghosts, I'm like sort of fascinated by people that do. So I had him go into the attic and check it out. So now we have to pay him longer, and he wasn't fixing anything at this point. And he came back and he was like, yeah, no ghosts. And I was like, yeah, typical for me. Like, so there's like, it's just like, and almost it's disappointing in effect when there isn't a ghost. But I was somewhat annoyed that my life has been fairly ghost free even now, except for this one time. So when I was in college, we all named our houses. It's sort of this obnoxious thing that we were doing at the time. And it was like every house was named like El Rancho Relaxo or whatever. We had like funny names for the houses. And my friend's house, he named it the dodecahedron. I think somehow the house was 10-sided, which seems like a very strange design. But we used to go there all the time. And so I went there one day, and we went down to the basement, and it was my friend Seth and these two other guys were there, and myself. So there were 4 of us total. And the basement was structured in a way that you go down. We were at the foot of the stairs, and the stairs, going up, you could see this doorway, which we forgot to close the door going up to the first floor. So we're in a circle and we're smoking weed, and we're all standing there. Oh God, I'm getting creeped out. And we're standing there, and a few minutes into this going on, I say, hey, wasn't somebody else here? Wasn't there another person here? And then I looked up at the top of the stairs, and I saw a boy in like a red hooded sweatshirt run out. And I said, so as I said, wasn't there somebody else here? And I look up and I see that. And as I see that, my friend Seth said, yeah, the boy in the red sweatshirt. And I was like, yeah. And the other 2 guys were like, what are you 2 talking about? Why would we have a boy hanging out with a small boy hanging out with a smoking pot? And I was like a little boy, like 10 years old, brown hair. And like, we saw the exact same thing. So my friend Seth and I, it got like weird between us because we had this strange experience, and these 2 guys didn't see it. And then I kind of stopped going over there for a little while. And then my friend Seth came over to my place, the one who also saw it. And he's like, this weird stuff is happening now. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And he goes, there was this sink in the house on the 2nd floor, and they called it random sink because it was literally like a sink, these like old college houses that are rented all the time. It was like a random sink kind of in the hallway that didn't have, probably was left over from some remodel. And they would always just brush their teeth on it. But the random sink would go on like in the middle of the night while everybody was sleeping. And then they would someone would come out and have to turn it off, and nobody was up. Things like that started happening. And then and my friend Seth was coming to me, telling me these things. And then slowly the other people in the house would start seeing like little like leaves rustling or something out their window and go out, and there would be no one there. So I think as I graduated and I moved to New York and I started doing stand-up, and it's a lot of things that we've talked about, I became more of a like tough meat and potatoes person. Like you have to have a gruff exterior. And I definitely didn't talk about this. And I moved even further away from like a ghosty spiritual person into a like very crass person that was like very direct and everything. And I didn't really talk about this. And my friend Seth and I didn't see each other for a little while just because we lived in different places. So I meet my boyfriend, who becomes my fiance, and I tell him this story about how I'm being completely terrified of this situation and how it's the only ghost I've ever seen. And he goes, I went to college in Ithaca, New York. And we were talking about getting married in Ithaca, New York, because his grandmother is buried there and his father went to college up there too. And we were going to go look at wedding venues. So my husband's like, all right, when we go look at the wedding venues, we'll go find a wedding venue. I want to go see where my grandmother's buried, visit her gravestone. I want to see that house where you saw the ghost, and then we'll come back. We'll make like that was the agenda, like find a wedding venue, go to a gravesite, and go to the house. So we quickly found a wedding venue. And then he's like, okay, let's go to my grandmother's gravesite. And he drives me basically to that house, the dodecahedron house. And I was like, what do you mean this is your grandmother's gravesite? And he's like, I go, this is my friend Seth's house that all of that happened. And he's like, no, right there on the property, there's like an old graveyard. And so that house, if you go like further up, like not maybe like right on the other border of the property, it was like almost attached to a very, very small gravesite where there was very few gravestones, including my husband's grandmother. And he's like, this is where you saw the ghost, like right by all of these dead bodies, and you didn't know that there were dead bodies right here. And I was like, no. And he's like, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but I am pretty sure that you did see a ghost. Like, you can't be a person that doesn't see a ghost. You did. And yeah, that's how it ends.
Damn.
Not the funniest, just the creepiest.
That is.
My friend Seth and I talk about it all the time now. Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah.
This is like back to back on episodes. I've had kind of like a paranormal.
Oh, really?
Type. Well,
I think that's why I wanted to tell it, because I was reading about all of the breakdowns of your episodes, and I was like, ooh, Adam likes creepy shit. I'm going to tell this instead of one of my like hilarious stories. I'm going to go for creepy with him.
I like suspense. Anything. The guy I just had on had a stroke, and he saw his dad, like when he saw like a big white light, and his dad came to him when he was out, and then he came back to, like, his dad asked him, do you want to stay or do you want to go? He said, I think I need to stay. And it was it was unbelievable. And like, this is the same time. I'm like, I'm about to have some kind of weird experience soon, because this has got to be like foreshadowing for me if back to back this is going on.
Yeah. Well, this is the only thing. Like I said, I live in a house that's ghost free, and I know that for a fact. But this has been my only experience with something like this. And it is something that every time I talk to my friend Seth, he can provide more details that I don't remember that make it even creepier, because he lived in the house. But of all of the things, 10 years or so, not even 8 years later, to find out that that house was attached to a very, very small gravesite, and a burial ground that none of us knew that there was a burial ground right there.
Do you have any like theories on who that boy was?
It's whatever it is. It's really sad.
Really?
It's got to be. I mean, he was a child that is probably dead. I mean, I don't think we saw a living child. I do think it was a ghost situation.
Yeah. I just was like, did that ghost represent something, or?
I don't know. I mean, I have children now, and neither of them resemble what that kid looked like. I can tell you that. He was Caucasian, brown hair, straight brown hair, kind of like a bowl cut, and a red hooded sweatshirt.
It sounds like something out of the movie It. Like it's.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, like it's. And it
does.
There's something really weird about a young bowl cut kid that, like, did you see his face, or like, was it sort of?
It was quick, but it was brown eyes. It was, yeah, that's it. I mean, it was quick. Like, I saw him at the top and then him run away. I mean, maybe I couldn't tell the color of his eyes. I assumed he had brown eyes because he had brown hair, which is not always true.
Huh. That's just a crazy coincidence too, that like, so she was buried there too?
She was buried. When he said, I'm taking you to my grandmother's gravesite, he took me to that house. And I was like, why are you taking me to this? This is where my friend Seth lived. And he's like, no, she's buried right over here. Yeah, that's what happened.
Damn. Something about it being like 10-sided too is...
A 10-sided house with a weird sink in the middle of it.
Yeah,
there's on a property where there's dead bodies.
And so much like circulation of new people coming through like year to year with college students and
right. Well, maybe the house wasn't always that. Maybe it was his house, Adam.
Yeah.
Maybe that was his house. And it's all been like renovated and it's just like filled with pot smoking, fish listening college kids now, or whatever people are listening to now in college. And like it's totally, and he's like trying to just get his house back. Maybe he died in the house. I don't know. Well, I will say this, having that ghost hunter / handyman at my house, who I got kind of like a little quick ghost hunt from, whenever I hear a noise or anything in my house, I do think, well, it's fine. There's no ghosts here. I know that for a fact. Like I do feel like I don't get creeped out because I know there's nothing here because I had a professional look.
Yeah.
So that's sort of fun.
That is. Yeah. I mean, also you would probably need to see it too for you to like be like, oh, that's that boy, you know. I just wonder if there's something between the two of you guys that caused you both to see that.
It is odd. And there were 4 of us. And the only person that I am still in touch with is the one that I shared that experience with. And when I mean in touch, like we have a very intense friendship.
Yeah.
We lost touch a little bit, like right out of school, because it took him a while longer to finish school and I was already in the real world. But I mean, maybe 2 years of not being as closely in touch, but we're very, very, even if we don't see each other, it's very, very close and very intense. Yeah. Like he came to LA with his wife on a visit. And I was like a couple days away from, I was like overdue to have a baby, my son. And my husband, for some reason, had a family emergency and had to like fly to New York and back for like a day for a funeral. And I was nervous I was going to like have this baby this day. And my friend Seth, like it was highly possible he was going to deliver my child. And it wouldn't have been, I would have been okay with that because of, we had already experienced like something so intense that I was like, okay, if this happens, like I'm okay that it's you that's going to come with me to the hospital. Like I was okay with it.
That's wild.
Yeah. But I think it's like, if you go through something like that with someone, you have a weird connection.
Oh, definitely.
For life. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. It's like, yeah, no, I'll have something to think about for the next 24 hours for sure.
Well, what do you think?
I keep going to a place where like it made me think of your fiance. Like I guess like if that was him, like as a boy or something. Like I don't know. I sometimes when I hear stuff about ghosts, I wonder if it's like some kind of symbolism or something like foreshadowing in your life. I don't necessarily think always of like it being somebody that's dead and coming back. Like I think it can mean a lot of different things. So
I mean, that was foreshadowing. That was, yeah, my husband does have brown hair and light eyes.
That's what when I thought it was like you saw him, you know, as a boy or something going to visit her, but like,
oh my God.
Yeah,
I'm like calling my friend Seth as soon as we hang up to tell him your theory. But then why would he see it?
I don't know. It
means nothing to him.
Yeah, no, that would be the exception to it. But I guess that's where my mind went to initially.
Oh.
I don't know. I know a couple people who have had these types of experiences before, and I don't like write them off. I just don't like, I haven't had one to warrant anything. Like the closest thing would be like on psychedelics, but that's not right. That's a different.
It's a different breed
for sure. But I don't know. I wouldn't write it off though.
Yeah,
I'm sort of jealous.
I wrote it off for like 8 years actually, and then when I went back and found that the gravesite was there, then I believed myself. But it's like something happens and you convince yourself that never happened. That's basically the direction I went, because I was kind of embarrassed in the circles that I ran in. We weren't really those type. We were more like we weren't talking about ghosts. You know, we were talking about how much stage time I got that week or whatever. You know, I was talking about a ghost. So it was interesting. Yeah.
I think if you have too many ghost stories, then that's like, then I don't know what the number is, but if you got like 10 ghost stories, like.
I think 5.
5, yeah.
I would go to.
And then at that point, you're just kind of making them up, or like you want to see ghosts.
You
want
to see a ghost.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. And I think there are people that want to see a ghost.
Yeah. And I think that's fine. I just don't know if they're always there. Like it's.
They want it.
Yeah.
They want it to happen.
But for it to completely happen on its own, or there was a 12-year-old boy in your house for some reason. Like, I don't know if like, you know, maybe somebody got that. That's the craziest thing, is like, you just have you see movies like where, I don't know, that movie Crash or Lock, Stock and Smoking Barrels, where like everything kind of comes together at the end, and like you see, you know, what this means in regards to that. And like, without all the information, I can't say definitively. And
that he wasn't there. Right.
Yeah.
That's true.
And that like those 2 other guys were there and they didn't see anything. So it's like, how much gets more weight than, I mean, could it have been really good weed? It's like,
I wouldn't say that has much to do with it. Because it was like quick. Like maybe 1 puff or 2 puffs. It's not going to make you go to that place.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like it happened pretty quickly. There's 4 of us standing at the bottom of the stairs in like a circle. And it was like, it went around, or maybe twice. And by that point I was like, hey, wasn't there somebody else here? And I look up, he went, and then my friend goes, yeah, the little boy in the red sweatshirt. And we both went like this, and the other guys were like, what are you talking about? So it couldn't have been that long to have gotten, I mean, I don't know, 2 puffs of weed. You're not like.
No, you're not.
You're not seeing things like that at all. Yeah.
Unless it's like dabs, or like you're doing something, you got a blowtorch or whatever. But.
No, this is just like upstate New York.
Yeah.
Crap. Yeah, for sure.
Well, I really had a lot of fun having you on, and I appreciate you coming and sharing that story. Is there, like, where can people find your stuff? Where can, if they're interested in your book, or, you know, doing
all of
a
my
workshop?
Stuff is on my website, margotleitman.com, and I'm going to be posting some new workshops and such up there very, very soon. I'm waiting to get my fall schedule sorted out. But any links to any books are up there, or on my Instagram at Margot Leitman as well. Yeah, and you can find any info of anything you want to learn more about, or if you're interested in story coaching or learning, or hiring me to come to your company.
Perfect. Thank you for coming on. Thanks again, everyone, for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to share this podcast with a friend and to rate and subscribe to us. Also, please don't forget to follow us on Instagram at FNF Pod. We're going to leave you with Jaga.
I just make the waves, I don't write them. I can hear the lyrics in my spirit as I write them. Why you wanna walk and talk just like them? I can't get caught up in all the hype and the excitement. I just make the waves, I don't write them. I can hear the lyrics in my spirit as I write them. Why you wanna walk and talk just like them? I can't get caught up in all the hype and the excitement.